excited for The Incredibles 2, so let's keep up the hype by checking out some of the most popular theories people have managed to come up with in the past 15 years. Stay until the end to hear how one of the sweetest characters could actually be a villain in the second movie. Don't forget to subscribe to The Things, hit that notification bell to keep up with our videos, and check out our community feature. Now let's check out these theories. Edna Mode is a supervillain. Who doesn't love this absolutely spunky fashion designer that easily steals just about every scene she's in? Edna truly is a special character, but this theory states that she might actually have a bigger secret.
What have you been doing, Robert? Moonlighting hero work?
We're all familiar with one of her lines about not dwelling on the past,
I never look back, darling. It distracts from the now.
which could connect to the fact that she was actually a villain back in the day. The theory also states that Edna is overzealous about seeing heroes in danger, which is quite strange for someone that's supposedly all good. And of course, we have to talk about her actual facility, which is full of explosives. And pretty unusual for someone whose character seems like it's the exact opposite of explosive. She also doesn't seem to like her guards, even though they're there to keep her safe. We all know that no villain has ever had a good relationship with guards, unless they worked for them. But one of the biggest facts that supports this theory comes from the moment where she made a suit for Jack-Jack. The Parr family never really considered a suit for Jack-Jack because they never assumed he'd be in danger. But because Edna thinks like a villain, she was able to predict Syndrome would target Jack-Jack. Okay, this one's pretty believable. It was an inside job. Redditor Honeybee Hound had an interesting theory that focuses on the government, because, let's be honest, what theory doesn't? This Redditor states that the government agents from the first movie had a job to watch the supers while they were retired in order to make sure they don't reveal themselves to strangers. But even though their job was to watch the supers, they really didn't do their job considering how many supers actually disappeared. So how come those government agents did nothing to stop this? The Redditor carries on, saying that the agents were probably working with Syndrome, as he was the best solution when it came to dealing with the supers. Supers disappearing was actually financially beneficial to the agents, as they didn't have to spend money protecting them anymore. In exchange, Syndrome was making high technology for the government. As we all know, he was a business entrepreneur, and such high-class entrepreneurs have to have high-class clients, so why not the actual government? Syndrome would be totally capable of creating something amazing for the government, especially if you take our next theory in consideration. Although, let's be honest, this theory makes the first movie pretty dark. Super intelligence. This theory also comes from Reddit, and it belongs to Frank West 21CP, who stated that Syndrome actually has a secret power.
Huh? Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
It's super intelligence. At the beginning of the movie, we see Buddy, aka Syndrome, admitting that he has no powers, but yet he's actually inventing some pretty impressive stuff. We see rocket boots, life sign scanning probes, a battle robot, and plenty of really useful gadgets. So what if Syndrome did have a superpower and it was super intelligence? You obviously have to know a lot of stuff to be able to invent such amazing pieces of technology. Syndrome also made a lot of dumb mistakes throughout his life, but that could simply be because he's not so good when it comes to thinking on his feet. There's no denial that he's a smart cookie, but what makes this theory so dark is the fact that his super intelligence made him develop a big ego, which cost him his life as he began to underestimate his enemies. We've heard of villains with big egos before, so this wouldn't be so far-fetched. But it's sad if you think about the fact that how much of his talent was actually wasted. Violet and Snug. All good and slightly dark theories come from Reddit, and this one is no different. Reddit user Desi_Londa101 possibly solved a question that's been bothering us all. Why does Violet have black hair, while Mrs. Incredible's hair is red and Mr. Incredible's hair is blonde? It seems suspicious that a child wouldn't have the same hair as one of her parents, right? And let's not forget about her head shape. Disney takes genetics into consideration when creating their characters so often. Kids will have the same hair or eye color as one of their parents, well, unless there's a hidden story somewhere in there. That's exactly what this Redditor suspects. Did you notice the parents don't have the same hair color as Violet? But do you know who does? Snug. The Redditor's theory states that because of Bob's inability to maintain a steady job, Helen would have slept with Snug before supers were outlawed. Snug provided her with a so-called shoulder to cry on, which then developed into something more. And we all know Helen keeps a picture of Snug next next to the picture of her family. Helen even tells Snug that he owes her when he lent her a jet without asking. There's definitely something going on between those two, and that something must definitely be Violet. Monsters Inc. connection. This theory isn't necessarily dark, but it's so cute we absolutely have to talk about it. A Redditor by the name of Ozertron had an in-depth theory of the connection between The Incredibles and Monsters Inc. Since Monsters Inc. came out 3 years before The Incredibles, it's not so far-fetched to think this would be true. This Redditor states that when Sully and Boo play hide-and-seek, Sully is amazed how good Boo is at hiding. The Redditor thinks that Boo's actually using her powers as Violet, aka being invisible. Both Violet and Boo also struggle to use her powers when they need to because they don't have the confidence. Let's not forget that they also pretty much look alike. The Redditor also added that Randall would be the perfect scarer for Boo, since his so-called invisibility power would be ideal for a child that's actually coming to terms with their superpowers. It's also strange how Boo's so comfortable with Sully, despite the fact that he's clearly a monster and every one of us would be definitely scared of him. It could be that Sully actually reminds Boo of her own father, aka Mr. Incredible. Down syndrome. We're telling you, if you ever want to know more about theories, you should check out Reddit. This theory comes from a user called Drickle2. It states that Syndrome's name is quite suspicious, and it would be very strange if it's not connected to Down syndrome. The Redditor states that Buddy, aka Syndrome, has a flat face, poor muscle tone, and several other physical features that could potentially indicate he has Down syndrome. We also know that Down syndrome varies when it comes to affecting mental intelligence, and can sometimes not affect it at all. Syndrome already has pretty high intelligence, and this Redditor claims that he is in fact a super, which would have awakened his powers, is blocked by a sad condition. The theory also states that this is the reason why Mr. Incredible snubbed Buddy, aka Syndrome, when he was a child, and it's why Buddy wants revenge. We've already discussed a theory that states Syndrome is actually a super, so maybe combining it with this possible condition would explain quite a lot about his behavior. What do you think? What happens to Jack Jack? This theory comes from a Reddit user called Spas_Mit_Hans, and it's a pretty popular one. The user states that Jack Jack comes out as the strongest and most overpowered superhero in history, but that there's a reason behind this. He possesses all sorts of powers, which is pretty impressive considering some of the superheroes still struggle with controlling theirs. Well, it could be that Jack Jack is showing all those powers because he's unable to control them and they're still developing. The Redditor states that his powers will focus and become a single and cohesive set of powers over time. He wouldn't be the first character to go through this, so there's definitely a possibility this amazing superhero trait will fade over time, which, to be honest, is quite a sad thought. We'll have to see what happens in the second movie because we're pretty sure all of this and more will be explained. When the Parr family sees Jack Jack use his powers, they're not amazed. It's probably because they've seen this happen before, and more likely every young super goes through the same thing. The Parr family actually has superpowers that depend on their personality. Dash has super speed because he's impatient, Violet gets invisibility because she's shy, and so on. Jack Jack will probably develop a single power over time, and we can't wait to see what that will be. No capes. This theory originally came from 4chan and Tumblr. However, the original creator isn't exactly known. Remember Edna's no cape speech because one of her friends called Stratogel had her cape caught in a jet turbine? Just take a step back and think about that for a second. Her cape got caught in a jet turbine. This most likely isn't something that she could survive. Stratogel was actually gifted with the superpowers of flight, which is pretty awesome. But the Dark and Sad story states that she saved a commercial jet airliner out of a steep dive when her cape got caught in a jet turbine. And since Edna designed her cape, it's most likely that her rule comes from feeling incredibly guilty over the fact that the cape was the reason why Stratogel passed away. It's even worse when you think what Edna must have gone through when she looked through her designs and started taking out every single cape she made. But despite her grief and her no cape rule, she knew exactly at what moment she really should make a cape. And yep, it was for Syndrome, and the intention behind it was very clear. Let's be honest, this is pretty dark. 15-Year-Old Gap. By the time you watch this video, you'll probably know everything that happened in the second movie, so you absolutely have to comment and let us know if any of these theories are correct. This one states that there's a reason behind the 15-year gap. We all know why Syndrome became a villain and how the whole thing ended, but did you notice Syndrome said he was getting revenge for the snub which happened 15 years ago?
15 years too late.
Yep, exactly 15 years ago, it seems quite strange that this connection would be coincidental. E! News takes this story further and speculated that this will relate to the sequel and Syndrome, or someone else might be seeking revenge for the events that took place 15 years earlier. 15 years is a long time, but soon the wait will be over and we'll be able to see if there's actually any pattern going on here. Imagine these poor animators had to wait all this time just because someone decided that this will be the entire punchline. Let's just hope we don't have to wait another 15 years if they decide to make the third movie, because honestly, we can't go through this again. Dash goes bad. Our final theory is the darkest of them all, but it also ties in with the second movie. You'll absolutely have to come back here and tell us which one of these theories turned out to be true. Most importantly, if this one did. A Reddit user called Professor_Wonder posted this theory a few years ago. The Redditor questions who will be the villain in the second movie, and comes up with a pretty solid theory that it's going to be Dash. He's always told to rein in his superpower and restrain himself. Dash is a middle child, and middle children are known to be the peacemakers and the ones that never seem to get enough attention, which is definitely the case for Dash. In the movie, we see him prank his teachers, which gains positive attention from his father. Middle children often don't get enough attention, so it's pretty possible that Dash would act out like this. The Redditor states that the second movie will talk about a former suit maker who's in hiding and wants to get back at the supers by creating a suit for Dash. This suit would give Dash his family's powers. By turning into a villain and continuing to do negative things, Dash will definitely receive the attention he needs. What do you think? Plausible? And that's it for our video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.